Welcome.
I never thought I'd be the type to ghost a job, but here we are. Let me set the scene. I'm 22, broke as a joke, living in a tiny apartment in rural Tennessee with my roommate Jake. We're both struggling. Rent's due, ramen's running low, the whole deal. So when I saw a Craigslist ad for an overnight cashier at a gas station about 15 minutes outside of town, I was like, yeah, bet. The pay was decent. The hours were 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and the guy on the phone sounded completely normal. His name was Earl. Older dude. Said it was easy work, stock shelves, ring up the occasional trucker, keep the place clean. What he didn't tell me was what happened to the last 3 people who worked that shift. I found that out later. Way too late. The first night was completely fine. I'm not gonna lie to you. I stocked the cooler, swept the floors, watched 2 truckers argue about something football-related at 3 a.m. I was on my phone half the time. I drove home at sunrise thinking, this is low-key the easiest job I've ever had. Second night, different story. It started around 1 a.m. I was behind the counter scrolling through my phone when I noticed the security monitor. You know, those grainy black and white screens that show you all the camera feeds? There were 4 of them. Front of the store, the back lot, the pumps, and the road out front. I wasn't really watching them, just kind of glancing over every few minutes. But then I saw something on the back lot feed that made me put my phone down. There was a woman standing by the dumpsters. Now, the back lot had no lights. Like zero. Earl had mentioned the floodlight back there had been broken for months. So all I could see was this figure, a woman, I thought, based on the long hair, just standing there, dead still, facing the building. I told myself she probably needed help. Maybe her car broke down on the road nearby, and she walked here. I picked up the store phone and called out on the intercom. Hey, if there's someone in the back lot, you're welcome to come in. Nothing. I waited a few minutes, looked back at the screen. She hadn't moved an inch. I'm not going to pretend I was chill about it. My heart was going kind of crazy at this point. I checked the front door. It was locked, no customers. I looked back at the monitor. Still there, just standing, facing me through the walls of the building like she could see me. I pulled out my phone and texted Jake. Bro, there's a weird lady standing in the dark behind the gas station I'm at. He texted back, LMAO, call the cops? I was about to. I genuinely had my finger over the call button. But then I looked at the monitor again. She was gone, just like that. No movement on the screen, no door opening, no shadow walking away. 1 second she was there, next second the back lot was empty. I rewound the footage. Yeah, this place had a DVR system, and watched it back 3 times. She was standing there, and then she simply wasn't. Not a single frame of her walking away. I told myself it was a camera glitch. I really did. I needed that paycheck, so I talked myself down and made it through the rest of the night. Third night, I started to regret that decision. Everything was normal until about 2:30 a.m. I was restocking the chip aisle, which, for context, is at the very back of the store away from the front counter, when all the lights went out. Full blackout. Not a flicker, not a dim, just instant darkness. I froze. My breathing got loud. I turned on my phone flashlight and started walking toward the front counter, telling myself it was just a breaker. Old building, whatever. As I got closer to the front, I noticed the emergency exit sign was still lit, so it wasn't a total power outage. Just the main lights. I was almost to the counter when my phone flashlight hit the front door. There was a face pressed against the glass. I actually stumbled backward. My heart was in my throat. It was a man, or at least the shape of one. Face completely flat against the glass, hands on either side of it, staring in. I couldn't make out features clearly. Just the shape, the eyes catching a sliver of light from somewhere. I grabbed the phone on the counter and called 911. I told the dispatcher someone was trying to break in. She said she'd send a car. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. And then the lights came back on. The face was gone. The cops showed up about 20 minutes later. They walked the perimeter, checked the back lot, looked at my camera footage. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, and it had rained that evening. So if someone had been standing at that door, there would have been something. One of the officers, young guy, couldn't have been much older than me. He looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. Kind of apologetic, kind of like he wasn't surprised. He said, "You're the overnight guy, huh? How long you been working here?" I told him 3 nights. He nodded slowly and said, "You might want to find a different gig." I asked him what he meant. He just said there'd been some incidents at this location. Said the previous overnight workers had all reported similar stuff. One of them, a woman in her 30s, had apparently walked off the job at 4 a.m. and never came back for her check. Another guy had a full breakdown and ended up in the hospital. I asked him if anyone knew what was causing it. He paused for a second too long and said, "Not officially. I worked one more night. I don't know why. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I needed the money that bad. But I promised myself I'd set up my own camera on my phone and watch it the whole shift." That last night, nothing happened. It was dead quiet. Not even truckers. Not a single car pulled into the lot between midnight and 6 a.m. The road outside was completely empty, which felt wrong in its own way because that highway usually had something going by. At around 4 a.m., I heard knocking. Not at the door. Not at the windows. It was coming from below me. Under the floor. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Then 3 more. I didn't run. I walked, because my legs weren't working right. I walked to my car, and I drove home, and I texted Earl. I quit. He texted back one word. Understood. Not, why? Or, that's too bad. Or let me know if you change your mind. Just understood, like he'd been expecting it. I never went back for my last paycheck. The gas station is still there. I drove past it once during the day, and it looked completely normal. Bright lights, a couple of customers, a teenager mopping the floor behind the counter. But I haven't driven past it at night since, and I never will again. I want to be upfront about something. I'm not the type of person who believes in the paranormal. Like, at all. I was always the guy in the friend group who had a logical explanation for everything. Weird noise outside. Raccoon. Strange shadow in a photo. Bad lighting. I was annoyingly rational about this stuff. I'm not anymore. This happened 2 summers ago. Me, my girlfriend Priya, and our friends Devin and Mara decided to do a 4-day camping trip in the Smoky Mountains. We'd all been stressed. Work, life, the whole thing. And Devin had done this trail before and said it was no cap one of the most beautiful spots he'd ever seen. Backcountry camping, real isolated, no cell service past a certain point. That was kind of the appeal. Full disconnect. We got to the trailhead on a Friday afternoon and hiked about 6 miles into our campsite. Beautiful spot, right next to a creek, surrounded by old trees, mountain view in the distance. We set up tents, made food over the fire, stayed up too late talking. Normal stuff. It was genuinely perfect. The first weird thing happened on night 2. I woke up at around 3 a.m. I don't know what woke me. No sound, no movement. I just opened my eyes in the dark of the tent and felt immediately, intensely aware that something was wrong. Priya was asleep next to me. I lay there for a minute listening. The creek was going, crickets were doing their thing. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Like, not a deer or a bear moving through leaves. These were deliberate. 2-footed. Slow. They were circling our campsite. I unzipped the tent and looked out. Nothing. Just the dead campfire and the trees and the dark. I told myself it was a person, another hiker, maybe lost. I called out, "Hello? You need help?" My voice sounded embarrassingly small in the dark. No answer. The footsteps had stopped the second I'd spoken. I went back in, told myself it was nothing, and somehow fell back asleep. In the morning, I mentioned it to the group. Devin laughed and said I'd probably heard a bear. Mara was quiet for a second and then said, "I heard it too." That killed the vibe a little. But we pushed through, hiked a few miles, saw a waterfall, had a good afternoon. By dinner time, we were all pretty much back to normal. Night 3 is where things got genuinely messed up. We'd all gone to bed around 10. Devin and Mara were in their tent, maybe 20 feet from ours. I was asleep. Actually asleep this time, not just drifting, when Priya shook me awake. She was sitting up in the sleeping bag, completely rigid. She whispered, "There's something right outside the tent." I listened. She was right. I could hear breathing. Not footsteps, breathing. Slow, heavy, right on the other side of the tent wall, maybe a foot from where we were lying. I could hear it moving slightly, like whatever it was crouching. Listening back, I grabbed my flashlight. My hand was shaking. I looked at Priya and she looked at me, and I could see she was terrified. And Priya does not scare easy. This girl is a trauma nurse. She's seen some stuff. So that made it worse. I unzipped the tent fast and shone the light out. There was a figure at the tree line, far enough away that the flashlight barely caught it, maybe 30 feet out. Tall, standing completely still between two trees. Facing us. I couldn't make out a face or details, just the shape. Human-shaped. Unnaturally still. I yelled, "Hey!" and grabbed the air horn we'd brought for bears and blasted it. Devin and Mara came flying out of their tent. I was pointing the flashlight at the tree line. Nothing was there anymore. We didn't sleep after that. We sat around the dead fire with our flashlights on until sunrise. Nobody said much. When it got light enough, Devin walked to the tree line to check. He came back looking pale. "There's no footprints," he said. "The ground's soft over there. Should be footprints." We packed up and hiked out that morning, a full day early. Nobody argued about it. Here's where the story should end. But it doesn't. The day we got back, I was unpacking my car in the driveway when I had this feeling. You know that feeling where you're certain someone is watching you? I turned around and looked down the street. Empty. Normal suburban street, middle of the afternoon. I shook it off. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. again. Exact same feeling as the tent. Sudden, total wakefulness, instant dread. I looked at the window. Our bedroom is on the second floor. There's nothing outside that window except air and the neighbor's roof. There was a shadow on the curtain, like something was standing just outside, blocking the light from the street lamp. On the second floor, I turned on the bedside lamp immediately. The shadow disappeared. I went to the window and looked out. Nothing on the roof, nothing on the ground below. I checked every window in the house. Nothing. This kept happening. Not every night, maybe twice a week. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., feel that feeling, and there'd be something. A shadow. A sound outside the window. Once, a handprint on the outside of the kitchen window that definitely wasn't there when I'd cleaned it 2 days before. Devin texted me about 2 weeks after the trip. He said Mara had been having nightmares every night since they got back. That she'd woken up screaming twice. That he'd started hearing things in their apartment. We never figured out what followed us. We went back to that campsite on a map and tried to find any record of incidents in that area. We found a few old hiking forum posts, going back like 10 years, where people mentioned feeling followed on that specific trail. One post said something about the local Cherokee history of the area, something about certain land being considered forbidden, but I didn't dig too deep into that because honestly, I didn't want to know. The incidents at our house slowed down after a few months, then stopped. I don't know if that's good news or not. What I do know is that I haven't been camping since. Devin and Mara moved to a different apartment. And Priya, who once rolled her eyes at every ghost story she ever heard, now sleeps with the light on. Make of that what you will. Okay, so I need to preface this by saying, I have looked for a rational explanation for what I'm about to tell you. I've turned it over in my head probably 1,000 times. I've talked to people who were there, and I still can't explain it. So take that for what it's worth. About 3 years ago, I was living in a 6-story apartment building in Chicago. Old building, like built in the early 1900s old. High ceilings, original hardwood. The kind of place that's charming in the listing photos, but kinda creaky in real life. I was on the 4th floor, Unit 4B. Good apartment, decent price, decent neighborhood. I was fresh out of college, working my first real job, genuinely felt like I was doing okay. I moved in September. By October, the noises started. It was always at night. I'd be in bed, usually somewhere between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., and I'd hear footsteps from the unit directly above me. 5B. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's just apartment living, dude. And yeah, I thought the same thing at first. You hear your neighbors. It's normal. But these footsteps weren't normal. They were slow, methodical, back and forth, the same path, over and over. Like someone pacing. Every single night, same time, same pattern. For weeks, I started dreading going to bed. I'd lie there in the dark counting the footsteps, feeling this low-grade anxiety I couldn't shake. I knocked on 5B's door one Saturday morning to introduce myself and say, "Hey, heads up, I can't hear you pacing at night. Any chance you could, I don't know, pace more quietly?" Nobody answered. I figured they were just out. I went back a few days later. Still nothing. I slipped a note under the door. No response. After about a month of this, I went to the building manager, guy named Phil, mid-50s, mustache, perpetually annoyed expression. I told him about the noise from 5B. He looked at me for a second and then said, real flat, 5B's been vacant since March. I told him that wasn't possible. I was hearing footsteps from up there every night. He said he'd go check. He came back. Let me follow him upstairs to see for myself. 5B was empty. Like, legitimately empty. No furniture, no nothing. Dusty floors. Phil pointed out that there were no footprints in the dust, which meant nobody had been walking in there. He checked the lock. It was locked from the outside and hadn't been tampered with. I thanked him and went back to my apartment feeling like I was losing my mind. That night, at 11:47 p.m., the footsteps started again. I called Phil's cell. He'd given it to me for maintenance stuff. It rang and rang. I texted him, "The noise is happening right now. I'm not making this up." He texted back like 20 minutes later, "I'll come by tomorrow." I didn't sleep. The next day, Phil came by with a locksmith and they opened 5B while I watched. Empty. Same as before. But Phil walked the floor and I watched him stop in the middle of the room and look down at the hardwood. "Huh," he said. I asked what. He pointed to a worn path on the floor. The varnish was rubbed away in this specific track, back and forth, same route, right through the center of the main room. Like the path had been walked thousands of times over a long period. He said it was probably from a previous tenant. Some habit they had. Walking in their sleep, maybe. That explanation would have been fine, except for what happened next. I started doing research on the building. Nothing serious, just looking it up online. And I found this archived article from a local paper, dated 1987. It was a small piece about a tenant at my building who had died in their apartment. An older woman, Unit 5B. The article mentioned that she'd lived alone for years after her husband died, and that neighbors had reported hearing her pacing at night, had been reporting it for decades, apparently. It had become a kind of background noise for the building. When she passed, one neighbor was quoted as saying she'd noticed it had gone quiet and realized something must be wrong. She'd been found after 3 days. I moved out at the end of that lease. I didn't tell anyone except my mom and my best friend Tyler why I was really leaving. I told other people the commute was too long. The rent went up, whatever. Here's the thing that still gets me. The noises stopped on December 14th. I didn't realize it until about a week later. I'd gone to bed and only noticed because the silence felt different. I looked it up later. December 14th was the date in the article. The date she'd been found. Tyler thinks it's a coincidence. He's probably right. It's probably all coincidence. The footsteps, the worn floor, the date, all of it. I'm not saying her ghost was up there pacing. I'm genuinely not. But here's the thing I always come back to. The dust in that apartment was thick. Nobody had been in there in months. Phil saw it. The locksmith saw it. There were no footprints in the dust. But I heard those footsteps every night. So either I was slowly going crazy for 3 months, and look, I'm not ruling that out, or something was making those sounds without leaving a single trace of itself behind. I've been in my current apartment for 2 years now. Ground floor. I specifically chose ground floor. And I always check who lives above me before I sign a lease.